Hello, and welcome to another installment of our Lenten luncheon studies on the Ten Commandments. This week, we are covering commandment number 8. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Hopefully, we can keep this one under 5 hours. This is a commandment that really has a lot of issues involved with it. And even though it's very simple, and as we read the original Hebrew, it is very simple in that it's only 4 or 5 words in the Hebrew language. To really unpack what this means to bear false witness against your neighbor, we really have to look at the original Hebrew that was used. Now remember, as we said before in other lectures, the first 3 commandments of the table, number 1, 2, and 3, were how we live our lives to God. And the last 7 are how we live our lives in relation to society, to those that we are living around us. So commandment number 4, of course, was honor your father and your mother, because they are the ones that gave you life. The 5th one was thou shalt not murder. In other words, you are not God. You cannot determine whether someone lives or dies. That is not your judgment. That is God's judgment only. And then, of course, the next one was thou shalt not commit adultery. Well, that is to prepare to set the holiness of marriage between 2 people, because we are commanded by God since the Garden of Eden to go be fruitful and multiply. And as God created us in the Garden of Eden, that we are male and female, He created both of us. And so then we come into thou shalt not steal. We go from being a personal relationship now into what we have as our blessings from God. And as we see around us, the fact that we want to steal something is because out of jealousy, we want to have something that our neighbor has. Instead of being content with what we have now, we want to go ahead and take something that our neighbor has because we think that we will benefit more from it. Even though God daily provides us with our daily bread, as we pray in the Lord's Prayer, we still feel that our neighbor owes us something. And if he will not give it to us, then we are free to take it. So that brings us into today's commandment of the 8th commandment. Thou shalt not bear false witness against our neighbor. And so as we look at the Hebrew word, to look at first the word neighbor. The Hebrew word for neighbor is re'ah. And it's defined in the Hebrew. Remember, Hebrew being a picture language. Re'ah means a very close associate, which means it's a family member, a business partner, a neighbor, both physical and figuratively a neighbor. Anybody that we are in contact with can be considered a re'ah, even a stranger, because we are a close associate of that person, because we are living together. And then we take a look at the Hebrew word for false. Now, false has a lot of connotations in the English language. And you could say, we could argue philosophically, well, what is considered false? Or if you want to flip it on its coin, what is truth? And even Pilate asked Jesus on the day that he was crucified, Pilate asked Jesus, well, what is truth? But what is false? The word that is used here in the original Hebrew is shakar. And shakar means of a lie, of a falsehood, of definite trying to deceive another person by your actions or your words. And so when you put shakar along with re'ah, you are definitely trying to deceive falsehoods against your close associate, your neighbor. Hence the way we translate it, trying to bear false witness. Instead of using the word bear, it sounds awful awkward. We would say presenting your neighbor in a false light. That would be the easiest way to say it. Do not present your neighbor in a false light or misleading. And so as we look at this and we say to ourselves, well, in Judaism, if we're looking at the Ten Commandments through Judaism, what does that mean? Well, we have to go back into the book of Leviticus, because in Leviticus, there is a rule that if someone has a complaint against a neighbor, you are to bring him to the elder of the tribe, and then also 2 witnesses to confront against that neighbor. Now, these witnesses, hopefully, are the ones who actually saw something being done, or are witnesses that can either attest for the man's character, would he be a person who would do such a thing or not? If you were the person that was brought up before a tribal elder on the case, say, of adultery, and you had 2 witnesses come forward, they literally could hold your life in their hands, because many of the laws in Leviticus had the penalty of death for those who were found guilty by these 2 witnesses. And so it's very important that these witnesses do speak the truth, because if they both lied, then you would have an innocent person potentially being put to death. And so this is what becomes important then, in that through the Judaist aspect, through property, through any of these rules in Leviticus, is that these witnesses need to be truthful. And so when we look at this here and argue about the bearing of false witness, for them it was a life and death matter. Now we go ahead into the New Testament and we look at the fact of Jesus. When Jesus was giving the Sermon on the Mount, he said that in the case of anything happening in the church, you are to bring him before the members of the church, the elders, and then to have 2 or 3 witnesses present. Same format as it was in Judaism, in that you present 2 to 3 witnesses. And also you would hope that they would also be truthful too, lest you be put out of the congregation. And so this becomes the point then for us today. How do we define false witnessing against our neighbor in our world today, which seems to thrive upon it? It seems that no matter where we listen to or read or whatever we do, we see this sense of false witnessing being carried out in so many different formats. And so Martin Luther, in his text on the Large Catechism, presents this commandment in this way as he's teaching. He said, "Remember the golden rule. Do unto others as you want them to do to you." So if you appear in court and you want to lie about something against someone, maybe someday you will be in the same position. And now you're hoping that the witnesses aren't lying against you. That's part of how Martin Luther described it. Because he said, take a look at how this is. He said, we should, being people that were born from God, created in God's image, we are to hold each other in esteem. We should speak well of each other and respect each other, because that is the only way that we can actually get along together in society, if we actually respect one another and not gossip, not tell tall tales, not spread false rumors about anybody. For in that case, nothing would ever get done if we keep spreading false rumors about other people. And then what happens is that the trust factor is broken. How can we trust people with our money? How can we trust our doctors if we think that they cheated on their medical exams? How can we trust our politicians if we think that they steal money every day or they lie on purpose just to start a war? Luther says that being children of God, we need to hold each other in respect. He said, take the example of Jesus. Jesus, in his lifetime, through the Gospels, never slandered anybody. He didn't speak ill of anybody. Now, he did tell Herod, to one of the people who warned him that Herod wanted to arrest him, he said to go tell that rascal fox Herod. But that's not a slander. Instead, Martin Luther says, in fact, that if something is known about a person that is out in the public view, that everybody knows it. Let's say somebody robbed a bank and the police catch him, and the bank robber is arrested and put on trial. Everybody knows with the evidence that this person is a bank robber. So when you talk in public about, oh, did you see the bank robber out there? That's not slander or bearing false witness. There are facts to back that up, that he is a bank robber. But if I were to go out onto the street and point to somebody and said, hey, this he robbed a bank yesterday, and then you keep spreading that rumor over and over and over, pretty soon people are going to start believing you that he did rob a bank, and then they're going to arrest him under false pretenses. That is the slander part of bearing false witness. But then it goes much deeper than that, Luther says. Luther says, let's say your maidservant or your manservant messes up. Do you reprove that person in public? No, he says. You take them aside privately in the home and then tell them what they did wrong. And then you tell them how to fix this. But then the conversation ends there, he says. You don't go out then and tell other people what your servant or servants did wrong. Now you're slandering them in public, even though you reprimanded them privately within the confines of your own home. And this is an issue that is so much among us today. Whatever happened to private conversation? We as pastors and priests are sworn to a confidentiality, that when someone tells us something, especially in confession, that to us is held sacred, because it's a sacred trust as part of our office of the keys, as we would say. It is part of our office of being able to grant absolution to someone who confesses their sins. If someone confesses to us a sin, then that is our confidentiality. We do not go and tell even our other colleagues about what you have said in a confession. That is very private and very personal. And so therefore that stays within us. Now, if you confess a crime or confess something of abuse, then that we do need to contact authorities about under state and federal law. But any other kind of sins or adulteries, that stays confidential. Our fellow pastors don't even find out about it because that is the sacred trust that is built between you as the congregation member and us as the pastor. That is like you confessing to God. God won't tell anybody else. It is just between you and God. So this is also very important for those that do leadership skills. One of the ways of being a good manager or a good leader is to see people if they mess up somewhere, is to take them privately aside, tell them what they did wrong, how to correct it, and then that's the end of the conversation. Nobody dwells on it, not from his end or your end. The matter is closed, and then we continue. And that is the way it should be when we're dealing with people. We should not hold the grudges and then go out and tell other people how bad things are with this person or that person, because that just then keeps fermenting and keeps fermenting the hurt or the embarrassment of being called out on doing something wrong. Let's say you know a mechanic made a mistake on your car. You take your car back to the mechanic and tell him, this is not done right. He fixes it, everything's good. Normally what happens is that we go out and we tell our buddies about how so-and-so can't fix a car, he don't know what he's doing. Or we go and say, well, this person who runs this beauty salon, they have no idea what they're doing. They're incompetent. I wouldn't send anybody there. Now you have violated the Eighth Commandment, because instead of just keeping it between you and the person of the business, you are now spreading out into the people and damaging their reputation. Reputation is another key aspect of bearing false witness. When we purposely slander a business, when we purposely slander a person just to make them look bad, then we're bearing false witness. Someone else may go to them and have no issue at all. But if people listen to you continually slandering, then they'll believe it. Same thing happens today. We have reviews. You can leave a review on the internet for any business or any product. And I've read several where we had people write business reviews that were terrible, just outright terrible. And you wonder if this really did happen or not. Or was it a case of just trying to be nasty? And there comes then the last aspect of bearing false witness. We are to speak well of others. We are to uphold them in the best light possible. We are to love our neighbor as much as God loved us. Think of all the things that you have done wrong in your life. Would you like someone to spread all those rumors out there? Probably not. But instead, we try to uphold our reputation. We try to be the best that we can be. And so if we love and support one another, even though sometimes it's as hard as can be, we don't try to slander them. And as Luther says, now if the evidence and the truth comes out into the public light, then that is not slander, for there you have the evidence to back it up. But instead, as Christians, we are called to love one another, to share with them their burdens, to present them in the best light possible, because we never know where Jesus may be at any point. He may be in that person that's blocking you in the aisle in the grocery store. He might be the overworked cashier at a fast food restaurant that you don't think is moving fast enough. And Jesus might be the one driving that 79 Pinto that only goes 45 miles an hour in a 55 zone. Love your neighbor as God has loved you, and hold your neighbor in the highest regard. And above all, speak well of all. For as the Golden Rule says, do unto others as you wish they do to you. Stay tuned and we'll have the next available video of commandment number 9 up pretty soon. Thank you and have a blessed day.